Yeah, so the climatic scene was essentially, a demon coming through this portal, and they had to close the portal and send the demon back, right? And that demon was, summoned by the queen. You decide to side with the queen. The queen actually thought she was working towards closing the portal, but
she was being manipulated.
Manipulated, and lo and behold, surprise, the demon lied to her. Who would have thought? Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
And I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
Alright, Ted, so today we're talking about the D&D retreat. Alright, so, as we mentioned, today we're going to be talking about D&D retreats. And, the reason we're talking about it is because you and I went on one.
Indeed.
And we got to play with a bunch of different people. I think there was like 16 of us involved, a bunch of different systems. And we're kind of going to discuss like pros and cons of doing this type of thing. It's not even the first time I've heard of it. Like, some of you might be aware that we do a thing called D&D in a Castle, and we have one coming up in the near future.
Indeed.
Well, D&D in a Castle started because one of the co-founders, Cameron, would get together with like all of his like old buddies that he grew up with, one time a year, and rent a cabin or an Airbnb or something, and be like, we're just going to play D&D for like 3 days straight. We're not going to bathe. We're not going to shower, feed ourselves properly. We're just going to live, breathe, gaming, right? And then, he had this epiphany like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this, but like in a castle?
Indeed.
And Tara, his sister, was actually involved in these Jane Austen events. So she was used to renting out like these plantations, these mansions, and having day events or weekend events. I don't know really sure, but she had some skills there and some experience. Cameron goes, "Hey, you've done this thing. What if we did that, but with D&D and a castle?" So they kind of did like a maiden voyage, the prototype in France. Some would say it wasn't actually castle, but a lord's manor. I imagine they pushed their glasses up on the rim of their nose and
you could totally be like, with our powers combined.
Yeah, they did that, right? So, but like, you don't have to do it in a castle. It doesn't have to be like a high end thing. The point is, right, for us, and I think this group, we're probably going to do it with on an annual basis now, is getting together and taking the part of the convention where you go to play games and just focusing on that and getting rid of everything else. You don't have the awful carpeting. You don't have a room full of tables where everyone is on top of each other. And like, you start role playing, but with someone else from another table because they're really loud. And then like, it just bleeds into your table, so that's what we did. And it was really fantastic. And really, anybody can do it.
The core elements is to, number one, it's a getaway. So you don't want to be like, oh, let's just go over to Bob's basement and we'll all just crash there for the weekend. It's you go to another location, similar to like you do at a con or what have you. And here you're going to get the opportunity to just be like, all right, we're going to set up this schedule. We're going to do this thing. And you can do it as like, run it like a drill sergeant. And it is 8 o'clock. Why isn't breakfast on the table? It's 9 o'clock. Why aren't we gaming? Or you could totally have it be like, no, we're mellowed out. We're just going to have fun, spend time with friends, and roll dice. And, anywhere in between that is going to best fit your collection of people that are get together. We did this with 16 people, 4 different tables. It was absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, so we can go over kind of like
what our structure was.
What our structure was and how we did the games. But it doesn't mean you have to do the games that way and you have to follow this structure. You can figure out what works for you and implement that, with your friends.
100%. So we had 16 people. That easily divides 4 groups of 4, and we decided we were going to do something a little bit crazy, a little bit wonky. So we had 4 sessions. We had a session 0 and 3 actual play sessions. And, the person who set this all up divided each into groups of 4 that didn't stay together. So you moved tables throughout. But session 0, you got together and you figured out what was the major plot for this location, where were you located, and how was it going to affect your story to the other tables that were there, because we were all essentially on the same place and there was a global problem, and that if one table managed to fail, the world was going to be destroyed, and therefore each table had to be successful. So we had like a Dark Sun-esque place that we called Dim Sun. We had the Underdark. We had a political table, and we had an island table that was like kind of like in a cold region. And once you set up and made your characters and made your central plot, you could then talk to other players or other tables and see how things were done. Like we sent emissaries to go have brief conversations. Then once everyone's session zeros were done, you would move on to your session 1, where you would change table and you would pick up one of the characters that were there and you would just play. And then in between each session, the DMs would talk to each other so that you could transfer notes. So like, all right, well, you were playing this story with this system, with these characters. Here's where you left off. Here's where the end goal is. So good luck with that. Have fun. And you then had to make sense of it to then run your story and then move on. And it was so much fun, so much chaos. And like I said, just can't wait to do it again.
So that was the structure. Mm-hmm. And you can go with like something similar to that, or you can do whatever you want. But actually, we say D&D retreat, but there was very little D&D played. I think the closest to D&D that got played was
what I ran.
What you ran, you ran a dumbed down version of 5e, but there was also Deathbringer, which is very 5e like, and also Shadowdark was run, which is very D&D like, but like that was as close as we got to D&D.
When all of this was set up, it was like, oh, let's go play a whole bunch of D&D. So I came prepped mentally for let's do D&D. Yeah. If I would have thought like, oh, well, this is the format before I got there, then I would have been like, all right, well, let's grab a couple other rules like kind of things that I could bring that I could easily have this kind of stuff set up for. But I didn't. So I'm like, all right, I'm doing D&D. So then when I sat down at my table and saw the characters that were prepped, some of the things because they didn't have ready-made character sheets. It was just conceptually here's what things are. So I had to try and pigeonhole these odd characters into my, Dim Sun or Dark Sun world. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be a challenge. So I don't think I can run a full 5e. I'm just going to be like, all right, let's pare this down. I got rid of anything that was kind of class stuff. Look, we're going to play with the proficiency modifier, your stats, and if something makes sense, we'll just kind of run with it. I don't want to take the time to have to pull out D&D Beyond or a player's handbook to figure out exactly, what is the nuts and bolts of your characters. And everybody had fun with this, streamlined version of it.
Yeah, you ran that. Another player just made something up on the spot. We said Deathbringer, Shadowdark.
You ran Zoo Mafia modified.
I heavily ran a modified Zoo Mafia to make it a fantasy game. There was, or Easy D6.
Easy D6.
There was IC RPG.
Mm-hmm. I got to play that one.
And Karen was the other one. So there was a ton of games played. And it's funny, but what we've discovered is a lot of people in this particular group, they just use D&D as a stand-in for RPGs, basically.
Well, I mean, it has become synonymous. So, a lot of times the term RPG and D&D are so synonymous that they just kind of correlate one to the other. So it's a situation where it's like, all right, is it really that big a deal? Is it that much of a problem? So, while I was prepared for D&D, to me, the rule set doesn't necessarily matter as much. And as I said in the beginning, I enjoy learning new systems. So sitting down to play something new every time has its own love and joy.
What is great about trying out new games and new systems?
Trying out a new game system lets you do a number of things. Number one, it has the ability to let you find out what kind of things, what kind of rule sets might you want to add into, your regular game. Because there's lots of things where a small component of a rule set fits so well that you could just lift it up and put it in another game. But it also tells you kind of things that you might not enjoy about a game system. So there's some that are super crunchy, there's some that are very rules light, and your play style might fit better in one than in another.
All right, so that's how it went, for our D&D retreat, right? Mm-hmm. But let's talk about generic. Let's talk about how it can help you and what you can do with it in your own games and your own D&D TTRPG retreat, whatever you want to call it, really, right? Mm-hmm. Your getaway. So what are our takeaways that are kind of non-specific?
So as much as it's kind of an unspoken situation, I really do feel the camaraderie and the food that typically goes with an RPG session. It needs to be there. So while you were oh, we're going to play D&D and we're not going to eat, to to me, that's like horrifying. I'm like, nah, man, you need your meals, you need your snacks, because there's the deal. And I know that with some of the games that I run, like, I know that I'm doing my job when my players are stress eating. And as much as I do care about my players, and friends' health, to me, that lets me know something. So, like, I really feel that, okay, there should be a part of your scheduling that does take food into account.
Yeah, so obviously, like, you have to take care of basic needs. That was be me being hyperbolic, right? But that being said, like, some kind of structure does make it a little bit easier, so I would recommend that. Maybe some of the people, like in our case, that were invited, weren't people that we really knew at all or were just acquaintances. So you get to build stronger ties, stronger bonds. So when you have the downtime where you're not actually playing the games, like you said, at meal times, or we kind of left like later evenings open to just kind of hang out and enjoy the ambience of the place that we had rented out.
Yep.
We rented out this huge like cabin. But, like, there's 16 of us, so it wasn't like too bad for everyone. And everyone pitched in for different meals and stuff like that. So, all of that is kind of super useful. And then also on top of that, you're just unplugging from the world. So, so that, you don't have outside distractions. No one's like, oh, I got to leave because, I got work in the morning or I got to get home. It's like, nah, you're there for several days. Like, we did a Thursday through Sunday, almost like a convention. And you can schedule it and you can be like, have different games and be like, who wants to run what, who wants to play in what. And you can do kind of round robin DMs. Like, you can almost do like sign up sheets, be like, okay, so-and-so is going to run this at this time. And it doesn't have to be like a huge thing where we had 16 people, which is a lot of people. You can even do it with your regular D&D or TTRPG group and be like, hey, let's do this. It'll be a fun thing. It'll be a getaway. And, maybe even plan some activities that aren't game related, right? Maybe you guys decide to do escape room together or have a movie night or something, It's just a way to further bond with people that you're either friends with or acquaintances with, or maybe you'd like to be.
So what is the advantage of gaming with new players?
All right. So gaming with new players allows you to experience different play styles. And also just like, to me, and I think to you as well, anytime we invite someone new to our table, it's always been an invitation to not just play games with us, but to be our friends. So, playing with new players is a chance to make new friends.
Yeah, I highly recommend that if you're going to do something like this, it does get planned. So you figure out and talk beforehand of, all right, are we starting a new campaign or a new thing just for this location? Or is it something that's kind of a continuing story and you're just going to have like one massive weekend where like you're going to make a major push? Is one person planning to DM for the whole thing, D&D, in a castle style? Or is it going to be, as Dave suggested, a round robin where like the DM rotates and, a player kind of like falls off or just kind of like fades into the background?
Or you do one shots, right? They're all one shots or something.
Or it's all one shots where nothing is connected. There's lots of different styles that you can do. We don't necessarily know what your group prefers, how you play, and what you would want to do at such a thing. So all of this is entirely possible. And I highly recommend that, you give this a try because it was a blast.
It was a good time.
So Dave, did you have like any awesome moments at your table that you think would be, kind of cool to share here?
If you don't know, Zoo Mafia is a game that Nerdarchy's working on, and maybe I'm a little biased on this one, but part of what we do with Zoo Mafia, there's like a luck Benny that you can use, but if you run out of it, then your character is going to be removed from the game. Maybe they die, maybe they just get sent away. In this case, I had two characters marker out in order to accomplish the goals for the group, which in this case, since it was a one shot, it just led to both of their demises.
Right.
But it was both of which were very spectacular, and they were able to, kind of like save the world via their sacrifices. One of the characters kind of got to make up for a big mistake that they made. Matter of fact, you made the mistake, sort of, depending on how you look at it. When you played that particular character, right. It was a political game, and you outmaneuvered some of your political rivals and foes, which happened to be in your same group. But in doing so you actually sided with kind of the dark forces inadvertently.
There's no kind of. I didn't know what I was doing, and I'll explain my side of the story once Dave's done with his. But yeah, I absolutely allowed the darker forces to have more power in the world. Oops.
Yeah. So the climatic scene was essentially, a demon coming through this portal, and they had to close the portal and send the demon back, right? And that demon was summoned by the queen. You decide to side with the queen. The queen actually thought she was working towards closing the portal, but
she was being manipulated.
She was being manipulated, and lo and behold, surprise, the demon lied to her. Who would have thought? So Maximus, the character, in the end was able to create a distraction, and he used one of his markers to go, hey, I actually had a secret contingent of my army set up and ready to go, which basically was able to draw the demon away long enough for one of the other characters to start working on the ritual to send the demon back and close the portal. But it wasn't quite good enough to send all the other demons away, and there were some that were still there when the other characters were like, well, I want to hold them off while the ritual is completed, and they used their markers to make that happen. So both characters end up dying spectacularly at the hands, or should I say claws, of demons.
So in the game prior to Dave's Zoo Mafia, we had a political game. We had a system that was made up entirely on the spot. Every character had a reputation score, and there was a modifier that went along with it. Nothing else mattered in this game because it was all about political maneuvering. Now, as Ted, I am a cooperative player. I am not a big fan of PvP, and I kind of said this at the beginning of the session. And so we were given an index card that had our character information, our motives, our secret goals, and then we were given a secret that we were trying to hide, which allowed us to have other things going on. Well, based off of my character's motivations, I'm like, all right, well, here's what I need to do. Here's my objectives. And that in some ways kind of conflicted with some of the other players. Since we didn't have information as to whether the king or the queen were in the right, I sided with the queen. Well, as things kind of got clearly between the players that, well, we're on different sides here, they wound up having a private conversation. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just step away from the table for a moment, and they wound up, quickly discussing this secret plot to basically sabotage me. And I fully expected bad things were going to happen and whatever have you, and it's a one-shot for me. It's no big deal what happens in this story. But I'm still going to play my character based off of what's on my sheet. So we come in front of the king, and they begin to offer these political machinations. And because it's all about reputation, anytime there was a roll-off, I wound up winning, which wound up decreasing their reputation, increasing mine, because all of this is happening right in front of the king. So very quickly, I outmaneuvered both of them based off of, my good rolls and my secret thing that I couldn't let get shared. So because of all of that, the session ends with me giving this MacGuffin to the queen, which brings about the bad things in the next session, and I have both of the other characters arrested. And I'm sitting high and mighty with all right, well, all of the things that I want to have happen are now in motion, even though all of them are bad.
I've won. Oh, what is my prize? The world is about to end. Run by demons.
So while for the session, I got to leave okay, I won this game. I feel great. Yeah. Hearing the story from, the other side is wow, my character's an absolute jackass. But when it comes to be a story and knowing that Dave ran the finale for that particular table, and knowing that my character did die and wound up doing something to
get a redemption arc,
slightly redeem themselves. Yeah. I'm like, all right, well, that wasn't my running, but it happened.
The next player that came in got the people that you got jailed freed after they realized how bad things have gotten and where they screwed up, and they began working to try and help fix the problem, and ultimately paid the ultimate price for it. But they saved the world.
Their head was ripped off. Whatever. But so that was just one of the tables that happened at this little gathering, and it was a blast to have these moments. So it's a lot of fun to kind of do this stuff.
So if you have any comments about this topic or any other topic, feel free to leave them down in the description below. Let us know what you think. Share with the Nerdarchy community.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all those things that make the YouTube happy.
Remember, we drop regular videos here on the channel, so come on back.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.